Our entrepreneur this week is a restaurateur, and he shares what is critical for someone to make it in this line of business.
We purely deal in local foods. It's our main niche. We came with the idea of dealing in local foods because we are looking at the health of our customers. Because when a customer is healthy, that means healthy living. Healthy food, healthy living. It's our motto. We started Arch Foods in 2013. That's when we started. We started from a very small place. We had 15 chairs, but the first day we began with 1 kilo of meat, 1 chicken, and greens, that is ebo, malakwang, ichadoi. Those are the things that we started with. But as we kept growing, within 2 weeks, we had already captured the market. I grew up as somebody who loved doing business. I started doing business as a young child. I used to grow sugarcane. I used to roll it, bring it from my village in Omodoi, bring it to Soroti town. There was a small rock behind the big rock where we are now. We used to sell that sugarcane there. And then also I would grow tomatoes, sell it to town. Yeah, I used to do that basically because I wanted some small money for myself to buy bites at school. I started that in primary. So it's passion. It's something that I had passion in business. But also, the key factor is my mom. We are a very small family. So I am the eldest in the family of 2. My mom, as she would go and do other things, she taught me how to cook. Yeah, she taught me how to cook. So when she goes to do other errands, I'm the one who remains at home cooking food for the family, come back, find when food is ready. So I learned cooking at an early age. Basically primary, around primary 3, I was already cooking. Yes, and then after my school, that is after my graduation, I had it in mind that I am not going to look for a job. I need to get something that I can do for myself to sustain me. Because looking at the job market, there are very many people who are graduating, they don't have job, the space is small. But I said, there are many things outside there that we can do. So I told myself, if I don't get a job, I will do something for myself. I will look for what I can do. Fortunately, when I graduated from Makerere University, I'm an accountant. I got a job with one of the international NGOs. So, and after that job, I got inspired. Our HROD director told us, today, I have hired you when we were doing our first induction. But think of your exit tomorrow. This is not a comfort zone. You need to think of your exit tomorrow. Imagine you don't have this job tomorrow. How are you going to survive? So don't come here and think this is what? A comfort zone. Think of your exit tomorrow. So that stuck into my mind. I told myself, now, what will I do? Is there anything that I can do that can keep me moving with the background that I have? I know I can do business because I started it as a young child. I know I can manage. And then quickly I said, no. I looked at Katakwi. I was supposed to have started this restaurant in Katakwi. I looked at Katakwi, there was a gap, but one of my friends started it. I said, no, let me leave. So then when I came to Soroti, I looked at Soroti. I did benchmarking. All the restaurants, they were frying food. Wherever you go, there's no boiled food. All the food, too much oil. I said, no, but I need to do things differently. We need to be healthy. Yeah, what can I do? Let me do things differently so that people appreciate that food can be nice. That doesn't mean that when you're going to boil to fry, frying food is the only solution, makes food nice. But it's tasty also if you did what? If you boil. There are key things that one needs to know when you're going to do business. One, you need to know who are your target customers. Whom are you targeting? Your client, whom are you targeting? Two, you need to have knowledge of what you're going to do. Yes. Three, you need to have records. Record keeping gives you an idea of what you're doing. So you need to have records of everything that you do, your purchases, your sales. Yeah, have all those records because they give you an insight of what to do. They determine even your pricing. Because when you have records on how much you're spending, on how much you're spending on purchases, paying staff, buying food, whatever, how much do you remain with at the end of the day? So if you don't have records, then you don't know. You are just there. You are in the unknown because you don't know exactly whether the business is making profit or not making profit. But with records, you are able to make informed decisions. There are quite a lot of challenges in business. One, there are a lot of uncertainties. When you're in this business, you are not sure. You are there preparing food. You're not sure whether customers will come. You leave it to God. But one way to avoid, to try to mitigate that is you need to learn. You need to know. You need to know you need to one like this business. We know from Monday, our day is Monday to Sunday. We know the peak days and then the non-peak days. We know the peak hours and then the non-peak hours. So the peak hours, but these peak hours, you increase the quantity of food that you're preparing. And then the less peak hours, you also reduce on the quantities and the menu, make it slightly smaller. The other thing is you have to avoid recycling food. It's disastrous. The reason we do that is so that the person who comes tomorrow eats fresh food, no recycling food. Because in this business, you recycle food, you are done. From a small place, we have now our own. Yes, we have our own. Where we are seated now is our own place. We are not renting. So it's one of the achievements. Then also, we have grown. We are employing a lot of youth. We are employing a lot of youth and a few adults who are able, who are still strong. So I feel happy because I am part of that institution that is giving employment to our youth in the country. And my prayer is I need to work harder to employ more people.
Now on this show, we always share that what you know or what you're good at or where you've actually professionalized can actually be your source of business. It can be your source of capital. Some call it intellectual capital. Now, there are those who are in the health space with, of course, good innovations. It could be in drugs. It could be in medicines. Now, in this segment, we pick the minds of NDA, the National Drug Authority, to find out what you need to know to actually make or put your drug on the market.
What should be on the label? There are some things we do not encourage to put on the label. You cannot, let's say, put undignified photos on the product label. No. Your label should have things like your company logo. It should have directions of use. Because when you make, let's say, a syrup, as an innovator, if you make a syrup, we want to know what doses have you found to be effective. At what age should this drug be started? If a drug is not meant to be used by children, we want it to be stated on the product label. If a drug is not supposed to be used by pregnant mothers, we want it to be stated at the product label. If a drug causes any side effect, it should be written on the label. We call that balanced information. We want the end user, by the time they look at the product, they know what to expect. They know the likelihood. They know what is at risk. Yeah? We want the dose to be indicated on your product label. we want your address to be on the product label. If the drug is notified by National Drug Authority, your herbal product, we need the notification number to appear on your product because we want the public to know that this drug has been approved by National Drug Authority so they can be able to separate the good drugs and the bad drugs, the notified drugs and the drugs which are not notified. That is where we want our public to be. Another thing that you should notice, we also want your address to be on your product.
In our tech segment today, we profile a young man who is actually making 3D printers from Uganda.
My name is Ntege Gonzaga. I work with Sundatech and I also work with IDIC. I'm being incubated at IDIC. As you can see, we make 3D printers in country. The problem we're trying to solve is reliable, affordable machines that we have not been able to reach our market. We are also solving the problem of using a filament that is not imported. Yeah, so we are import substituting filament. But most of all, we are trying to make sure that the barrier to entry for low volume manufacturing is reduced. What does this mean? It means that if you want to make a plastic part, you don't need to have a mold, an injection molding machine, a large factory and a setup. All you need is that small machine in the background printing. So what are some of the applications that you can make with 3D printing? If you are into, say, casting flower vases, this is one of the pieces that you can make. Yeah? This is a cast piece, but you needed a 3D printed mold to make it. It's not like a machined mold or something. So what means that if you have a 3D printer, you can make a different design every single time. It's a very flexible manufacturing process. So you can make almost anything you can think and design. This is a learning aid. This learning aid is a heart. It shows all the veins that come out of the heart, and it's very good for very tactile learners, people who are very hands-on. Yeah. So this can also be made with a 3D printer. Ideally, to make something like this, you would have to have a mold, a very sophisticated mold, and you have to be able to make 100,000 pieces a year, and that is also extremely challenging. So for low volume manufacturing, this is the answer. If you're talking about a border economy, and you want to be a manufacturing economy, I would think this would be the border of manufacturing. So the beauty about these printers is that they are actually made here. And the process of making them came from a frustration of a product we made. We made a product called Akaboxy, where you have your child's favorite cartoon character and you put it on the box. We had to laser cut the box, sand it, paint it, sand it, paint it, until you get the final product. It was so difficult to make. So, and then the logistics of coming up with a mold were also very, very expensive. So we looked for a technology that we could actually make that product because we already had demand. But the technology itself was out of reach. It was very expensive and we couldn't afford it. So we resorted to engineering our own technology here. The way 3D printing works is that there's a roll of filament, there's a roll of plastic that is being pulled into a melt zone. And that melt zone is being moved relative to the bed. It's like sliced bread. When you have sliced bread and you have different layers of sliced bread, when you put the slices together, they make a shape. That is exactly how 3D printing works. However, the slices in this case, they are like 0.2 of a millimeter. That is like a fifth of a millimeter. If you know what a millimeter is, it's like almost the size of your hair. So it just layers, cuts the software that cuts the 3D model into the very thin layers. And then it melts the plastic and goes around the bed laying the plastic, layer by layer, layer by layer, layer by layer, until you get to the top of the product. That's how 3D printing works. So for 3D printing, you need to be able to have a computer-aided design product. So you need to get into your computer and design something. Once you have a model, then you take it to another software called a slicer. The slicer is the one that's responsible for cutting the model into those very thin slices. Then it compiles a file, which then it gives the 3D printer, which understands it, and then the 3D printer will build that file. So what you see here is a product that has leveraged a lot of materials you can get from our local economy. the steel, the shafts, all of them, we try to find them around in this market and get the products to work. This is an aluminum plate from here, it's cut here, the motors are got from here, the frame, the plastic, most of these parts are actually printed by this machine. So the beauty about this machine that it prints its own parts. So the orange parts that you see, this black part you see. So what we have done is to reduce the logistical component of making this machine here. That's how we have made it reliable and affordable. But also, by continuously iterating, we make a design, it doesn't work, we change it. We make a design, it doesn't work, we change it, we improve. So when you continually work with the product, that's how you come up with a spec that actually works for your environment. So that's how we came to make the printer here. We have already made 100 machines, which we have supplied to the Engineering Development and Innovation Center in Rebitete. They'll be holding some boot camps there where people will come and learn how to use the technology. Now this foot here is an important piece. Why? Because if you're prosthetic, your shoe size will keep changing. And when it keeps changing, especially if you're a young adult, you'll need to buy other feet like this. So these can be made here.
Well, with that, we've come to the end of this Digital Man and Market. Thank you for being part of the show. Now, we are always closer to you than you think. We are online. We are on all digital platforms. We are very close to you on your small screen, the phone. So you can drop us a line or check out these and more stories on our digital platforms. We are on YouTube, we are on TikTok, and then we are on Twitter and others. So from me and team, I'd like to wish you a very good evening and God bless you.